Hi everyone, my name is Barkha Dutt. I am a journalist based out of India, and it is an absolute honor, privilege and pleasure for me to be your MC for the day's critical and we hope enjoyable conversations today. As so many of you who have connected to us from around the world know, we've already heard from some extraordinary women who have shared their journeys with candor, with humor, with wit, and also, above all, with optimism. As women leaders in global health join us from literally every part of the world, on this second day of the conference, we aren't just going to reimagine leadership, look at issues of inequity, look at issues of underrepresentation, look at the acute pay gap that continues to confound women who make up 70%, as we've been saying, of the global health force, but occupy just 25% leadership positions. We're also going to be looking at ways forward. We will be hearing through the course of the day from pioneering women who have founded companies, broken barriers, shattered glass ceilings, and provided mentorship to millions of women from across the world and across cultures, geographies, classes, ethnicities, and race. Before I begin the day's proceeding, I have some housekeeping announcements. Now, remember, there is a chat box open. In that chat box, you can't actually directly put your questions to the speakers, but we do encourage you to keep the discussion forums alive by sharing your comments, your opinions. We encourage you to look at the agenda carefully. There will be several breakout sessions. There will be several opportunities and occasions for you to break into smaller little groups. And it is extremely sort of important that you use the chat box to keep smaller points of discussion going and keep this as dialogue driven as is possible. Now let's get started with the big overview. We've often called COVID, the virus, the pandemic, the great equalizer. But everybody who has done any work at the intersection of medicine and gender knows that it has been anything but. In fact, there are estimates, now very, very clear estimates of how severely and badly women have been hit across the world by the pandemic. In the first year of the pandemic, in 2020 alone, 54 million women around the world lost their jobs. And 90% of them left the labor force completely. Put in simple words, it means that because of the COVID pandemic, fewer women today are working than ever before. UN Women estimates that 47 million more women will actually slip into poverty and become extremely poor because of the pandemic. So on the one hand, you have this abject economic and social and professional consequence where women will be dropping out of the workforce. As you go down the chain, millions of girls have actually fallen out of the schooling system. Now, for girls to remain in school is not merely about them having an education. It is also about them, and we've heard this at our plenary on the first day, it is also about them being forced into underage marriages, being sold and trafficked, and also losing access to nutrition. In many low and middle income countries, girls being in school and going to school is their only opportunity for one hot, freshly cooked meal a day. And the gender inequity travels all the way down to access to vaccines. We have seen that there is an inequity. There are basically more men who are able to get vaccinated than women. And the reasons for this are complex and manifold. So we're here to talk about leadership. What kind of leadership can plug this gap? What kind of leadership can bring real change? And whether that change can come from top down or bottom upwards or a combination of both. Let's get the ball rolling with a fireside chat with one of the pioneering women leaders of India. She's the chairperson of Biocon, a pioneering path-breaking voice in the field of healthcare. And there is so much to learn from her as well as from other global leaders. Let's start the day's proceedings with a fireside chat by welcoming Kiran Shaw. At this global summit, we have been meeting women leaders. We've been hearing first person accounts of the hurdles they've had to jump over. We've also been looking at the very intriguing questions over whether certain kinds of leadership are masculine and certain kinds are feminine, or is that also a gender essentialism of its own kind? I'm very, very pleased now to welcome for this fireside chat one of the most inspiring, iconic women leaders in the space of health, science, and technology, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. Ms. Shaw, of course, as you know, is the chairperson of a Biocon, and her work has been speaking for itself for many, many decades, in particular through these 2 years of the COVID pandemic, where, as we know and as we've been talking about, women and girls have been disproportionately hurt. Kiran, welcome, pleasure as always. You and I have had this chat many times, but not everybody in our global audience actually knows how many rejections it sometimes takes before success comes, and how you personally, uh, and I know you've shared the story once before with me, how a no to you, a kind of flat no, a door shut in your face actually led to another door opening up. So share that story with our audience.
So always a pleasure, Barkha, as you said, it's kind of a mutual feeling between us. But let me start by answering your question and say that I often call myself an accidental entrepreneur, only because the door was shut on me by my own domain, which was brewing, where no brewery in India wanted to hire me because they just felt it wasn't a woman's job. And it was that disappointment and dejection and rejection, if I may say so, which led to my starting my own business. Because I just felt that, I had to put my education and my domain expertise to good use. And I thought starting a biotech company would probably do that.
So you're basically saying that had you been able to pursue your original dream to be a master brewer, then maybe we would not have had Biocon and Kiran Shaw in this avatar today.
Absolutely. Who knows where fate would have taken me. But certainly the reason I started Biocon was because I was rejected by the brewing industry in India. And I can tell you that, this rejection continues, I'm sure, with many, many women who are seeking job opportunities simply because either workplaces are not ready to, welcome women, or that we stereotype jobs and feel that this is not a woman's job, which it was in my case. And I think that continues to happen in many, many kinds of jobs. And I often say to my HR folk in at Biocon that they are also guilty very often of doing this, because we kind of load the dice against women by saying that when we try and sort of write up a job profile, we pay a lot of emphasis on experience. And obviously, women don't have the years of experience that their male counterparts have. So I often say to my HR folk, listen, be fair to women. Evaluate women for their potential, and you can evaluate men for their experience. But I think that's the way you have to deal with fairness in terms of job opportunities.
And I'll get to whether, as a woman leading a giant company as Biocon, there are certain practices or best practices that you think can be emulated across the industry. But I'm intrigued to know, because I know that you're not someone who takes rejection to heart, but also doesn't, in a sense, let anyone undermine her confidence. All those decades ago, when you were told that beer brewing is not a job for women, how did you respond? At that moment, you were much younger. You hadn't yet sort of built this empire. You weren't the success story that you are today. How did that feel at that age and stage?
It was almost as if, oh Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they are saying. And I think my late father was the one who was so disappointed in his own alma mater that felt that his daughter was not good enough. And he was so proud of the fact that his daughter had, pursued a brewing career, and that was all set, I mean, a brewing profession. and in terms of education. And then she was all set to pursue a career, but that was not to happen. So I think I certainly was very disappointed, very dejected, because I just felt that it was unfair. It was not what I expected, because I felt science and technology ought not to have any gender barrier, because I knew that I was good. I knew that I understood the subject very well. I had even commissioned a brewery that had been, left incomplete by a set of foreign consultants. And I knew that I could actually run any brewing business. So I just felt insulted and I felt demeaned.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can't imagine how many millions of women, in fact, go through exactly those two words, insulted and demeaned, uh, every single day of their lives as they set out to pursue their dreams. Uh, Talk a little bit about the biggest barrier in creating Biocon, that journey.
Interestingly, Barkha, the biggest barrier to, building my business was capital. Access to capital was always a big challenge, a big barrier, because banks, in those days, there was no venture funds. And in those days, I had to rely on debt financing. And banks just were very reluctant to lend to a woman entrepreneur, because they felt that I was high risk. They felt that I was trying to start a business which was highly risky as well, and that I had no business experience. So I was, it was an added risk. So I just found that very, very difficult. But you have to persevere. I mean, as an entrepreneur, it is a journey of endurance and perseverance, and you don't give up. So I did go from bank to bank, knocking at their doors, hoping that one of them would actually feel sorry for me and extend that credit that I was looking for. And it did happen. And thereafter, again, when it came to taking my company to the next level, I again found it very difficult to access a greater amount of capital. And as the story goes, I actually found someone uh, in Mr. Bagul, who had just started a venture fund, and he felt mine was the right kind of company to invest in. So that was really kind of unexpected, and it really changed the course of my entrepreneurial history for sure. Because instead of raising a debt, I was able to raise equity, and that's something I'd never thought of. And that really changed the course of my journey. So I just think that women still find it very difficult to access capital. I know that many women entrepreneurs and budding or aspiring women entrepreneurs come to me and complain of the same problem. And they say that, we are trying to access venture capital, but it's so tough because we just don't seem to get venture funds to give us that helping hand. And I realized that, I did mention this yesterday at an interview I gave, saying that unfortunately, the money is in the hands of men. And, when men and women startups go and present their business cases to venture funds, I feel that men are far more confident in the way they present their business propositions than women. Women are very shy, self-effacing, and don't really tell a very strong story. And that's why I tell a lot of women, please have that self-confidence and tell your story in a very emphatic and impactful way, because that's what actually gets you the capital.
But isn't there so many factors here that inhibit women? There's social conditioning. There's the fear of being judged if you're too assertive or aggressive. I know that women like myself and you do not think like this. Our personalities are not wired like this. But there are many women who are emerging from very protected environments who balk at the thought of being assertive, and who come from this age-old idea that their work will speak for themselves. But in a room full of men, often the work doesn't speak for themselves, does it?
So, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be strong, you have to be assertive, and, you have to understand that without it's a survival instinct. You have to fight for your rights, you have to fight for that capital. And therefore, I think women entrepreneurs must realize that if they want to succeed. And I know that many, many successful women entrepreneurs have done just that. If you're, an employee, then you might think your work will speak for itself, and very often it does. If you're in the kind of role that is extremely critical, and when they know that you're the one who's actually solved a certain problem, then you do get noticed. So yes, your work can speak for itself if you're an employee, but as an entrepreneur, you have to be assertive.
You spoke briefly about, the role of your father in your journey. But I know personally from knowing you what a strong role your mother has played. And, one of the things I remember you once told me is that your mother is working into her 80s. I hope I'm remembering this
90.
correctly. Oh, now that's word 90. Wow. And this, how that presented itself as a example always for you to emulate. Can you speak a little bit about that influence in your life?
So, my mother becoming an entrepreneur at a very late stage of her life is a recent kind of happening. It was my late father who really influenced me in many, many ways for a very long time, and I'm glad at least he saw part of my success. But my mother has always been a steadfast, anchor for me, because she always believed in what I was doing. She was always proud of me, and of course, when my father passed away, it was my mother who then decided that she was going to start a business of her own.
And what was that business?
So initially, she started organic farming, because apparently that's what my father had, dreamt of doing after retirement. And then she kind of took to a laundry and dry cleaning business. And that's what she does today, very, very successfully, if I may add. And, she's a economically independent woman. Her business is thriving. She's very proud of the fact that she doesn't have to ask her children for any financial support. In fact, she feels very thrilled when she can actually give us generous gifts on our birthdays, from her earnings. So I think that's what really inspires me today, to think that, well, you can start a business at any age, and women can start a business at any age and be as successful. So I just think that, this whole myth about there being a gender differentiation in terms of successful entrepreneurs has to be busted. Because, this notion that women are not ambitious, women are not risk takers, women just don't have it in them to be ambitious and build big businesses, all this is wrong. I mean, I know that yesterday we just had a stellar IPO, which just shattered all stock market, sort of valuations for a company of its kind. And it was a woman who did that.
Yeah.
And so I think she busted a very important myth. I busted that same myth, in 2004 when I went public, because again, at that time, of course, it was a very different time, but to be $1 billion market cap was a big thing and a big deal. And so I busted that myth that I was not capable of building a big company, and I was not capable of building the kind of value that investors want. So I think, women are very smart. Women have great business ideas. And I think with all these role models that are beginning to emerge, I think you will see more women finding the courage to basically run and, establish very large businesses. And I think today, of course, new age businesses are very different. They are asset light. They're all based on technology and various kind of consumer models. So I think this is a great opportunity for young entrepreneurs to try their hand at entrepreneurship, and there is no gender barrier.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that because in India, actually, data shows us not our class of women, but certainly in poorer rural pockets of India, The access to smartphones, for example, is not equal for women and men. But of course, in our class, you're right, the technology is breaking down barriers. In other parts, technology itself remains a barrier. But Kiran, I think I was struck by the fact that a lot of times it is the absence of equality at home that holds women back from being able to embrace equality at work. And I know that you had once shared with me your concern that we have a number of women in India who have degrees in science, who are drawn to the STEM subjects, but do not necessarily then convert these degrees into actual earning jobs.
Absolutely. I find that really a shame in a country like India where we can't afford to waste education. And I feel that any woman who actually has a degree, any degree, I mean, it's not just science and technology, but it's also any degree ought to really apply that education to some economic use. I know that a lot of young people today find lots of different kinds of jobs, irrespective of what they have studied. And definitely in terms of science, because I'm a scientist, I feel very strongly about women in science. And I do feel that when women who are, qualified with BSc degrees or MSc degrees and some with even PhDs are just sitting at home doing nothing, really infuriates me because I feel they could make good use of
But
those
of course,
degrees.
oftentimes that's not their choice, but their family situation, their home environment that creates multiple pressures does not encourage them to actually find themselves.
You're right, but at the same time, I guess we are strong women, Barkha, and we feel that education should empower us to be thought leaders, to be able to influence, to be able to change this
Mm.
societal mindset. That's what I feel, that if you're a educated woman in an quote unquote uneducated family who thinks that women should be at home, I'm sure you can basically, fight for your rights in terms of working or doing something meaningful. And I know many women who are actually quite brave to do that. But I agree that the societal mindset has to change. And I feel the societal mindset will change when you see more and more women working. And as we all know, a double income family is always better than the
Mm.
man having to fend for the entire family. And
And
I
of
know that
course, the quality of relationships is also better if you're economically equal, which is not something
absolutely.
that society says to women often enough.
Well, that's true. And I think children themselves benefit a lot from having two earning parents because, the kind of respect that they have for their mother and father, for that matter, is very different.
Let me take this as a cue to go straight into whether you believe women-led companies are or should be different. And this is a big dilemma for thought leaders to address because in one way we have fought all of our lives to not be defined on the basis of our gender. On the other side, when we do occupy positions of power, we feel we owe something to other women. So, how should that impact our culture of best practices?
Barkha, it's very interesting. Gone are the days of command and control. Today it's all about empathetic leadership. It's about leaders seeing themselves as coaches, where you basically have a team, a very diverse team. You're trying to basically make sure that you get the best out of each one. So a leader is really one who gets the best potential out of his or her team. And I think women are very good in terms of being empathetic, being able to delegate responsibilities and allowing young people to unleash their potential. I think women are less insecure than men are, because we've been subjugated and because we are not all the time sort of elbowing our way to come to the fore, which a lot of men do. I think we are more comfortable with playing a kind of a background role and allowing people to grow and excel. Now, as a leader, that's a very good quality. As someone who's an employee, maybe that's not such a great quality. But I think when you talk about leadership, I think women make very good leaders because they're very fair, equitable, and empathetic. And I think that's what today's world wants in terms of leadership. Whether it is ESG, where all these things count, because it is about being inclusive, focusing on diversity, and of course the environment. And I think women are good at all of that. So I think ESG is becoming such an important part of the corporate world, that I think women actually have an advantage, and we should take that advantage because we have a natural flair for ESG.
Let me, also ask you to focus your attention on what these COVID years have been like for women and girls. The manifestations have been multiple, whether it has been a spike in cases of domestic violence, as schools have shut physically and classes have gone online. The digital divide has particularly hit girls, because where there is one device at home and there is a boy and a girl, the boy will get access to it ahead of the girl. There is an absence of equity even in vaccine access. Nobody quite knows why. Sometimes economists have wondered whether it's linked to the absence of equality in access to smartphones, because so much of our vaccine program is still driven by apps, though walk-ins of course exist. How do you see the impact of COVID on women and girls in India?
So there's a huge socio-economic impact of COVID on girls and the girl child, Barkha. I think when it comes to the professional woman, in fact, it's very interesting. There was a recent survey conducted on, the hybrid model versus the work from home remote model versus work on site models. And the preference of 80% of women was to work from home, so that they could actually have that work-life balance that they often complain about, right? Because unfortunately, women do a lot more of the
yeah, that's what it takes me back to, that if there is equality at home, there'll never be equality at work.
Yeah. So I think that's quite an interesting aspect of the survey, though not surprising. On the other hand, I think, this vaccine inequity that you talked about was largely linked to women worrying about becoming infertile. And in a society like ours, that becomes a big issue, because they feel that, if I take a vaccination, I might never be able to bear children. For some reason, that kind of, miscommunication has also been rumored. So I think that is more of a reason for less women being vaccinated. I don't necessarily think it's because of their gender in that strict sense of the word. And thirdly, I do believe that, yes, I think women have had the worst impact of domestic violence during the COVID pandemic, largely because, men were at home, they were very demanding. And obviously, many men would drink at home, even though they were supposed to be working. So I think all that led to very, very unpleasantness and, very, very unacceptable behavior, which obviously then got, noticed, and we are very, very concerned about this rising levels of domestic violence. But equally, I think women also got to understand that they could basically take their complaints on various platforms for people to take action. So I think that also got kind of amplified, and we started discussing domestic violence in a much bigger way than before.
Yeah. In the end, Kiran, what would be the one thing that you would tell your 18-year-old self, and therefore to all the 18-year-olds listening today? We often learn as life takes us ahead, but we also unlearn. So what is it that you would tell your 18-year-old self today?
I think today's world is a very different world. Because of technology, there are no barriers, and there are no gender barriers. It's in your mind. If you can learn to use technology, you will not see yourself as a man or a woman. You will see yourself as someone who can leverage technology to further yourself. And I would say, whether you want a good job, whether you want to start a business, I think the opportunities are tremendous. And, in this time and age of new age companies, the gig economy, the opportunities are just limitless. And I think for young people, it's the best time for them to pursue their dreams. And I think for a woman, I think the time couldn't be better. So I would really say to every young woman who's an 18-year-old and above, just don't think of yourself as a woman. Think of yourself as a young person in a new world with limitless opportunities, and just try and unlock your potential to your best ability.
And dream big, I think, is a very useful advice. No dream is too big, and it's your own potential that you have to unlock. A fascinating thought there, whether technology has in fact made the world gender agnostic, and I'm sure that will give our speakers through the day something to think about and talk about. Kiran, pleasure as always. May you go from strength to strength. Thank you for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you, Barkha.
Thanks, Kiran. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, Kiran. Well, we were just talking about COVID and its impact on women and girls. Now let's meet women who have been at the front line, the global front lines of COVID research. And it's time for me to hand the mic over now to Dr. Gitinji Gitahi, who will be the moderator for this extremely critical conversation.